Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel, and Mirz Hashem today we will be learning Daf Samach Beis Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos, and we pick up today on Samach Beis Amid Aleph, 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch with a new Siman, Siman Reish Pei Daled. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanusunu Batzaro B'Shivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayom U'Bein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yirachem Aleihem V'Yitziam Yitzaro L'Rvacha, Me'afelu L'Oira Mishibud L'Geula, Hashta B'Galo V'Zman Kariv V'Nemar Amen. Our learning should be a schus for Shalema, for Tzvi Ben Leah Miriam, for Daniel ben Naomi, and our learning should be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonason ben Michal, and Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shem should watch over them, together with all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol makayim shehem. Okay, so we're picking up here with the new Siman, Siman Reish Pei Daled, Dinei HaTorah U'Birchaiseha, the halachas that pertain to the laning of the HaTorah, the portion that we lane on Shabbos from the Navi after we complete Kriyas HaTorah, U'Birchaiseha, and the brachas that we make over the reading of the HaTorah, U'Bai Zayin Seifim, and here we have 7 Seifim. So before we even start the Mechaber over here in Sif Aleph, did you ever wonder why the HaTorah is called HaTorah? And why the one who gets the Aliyah, who is going to read the HaTorah, or is going to at least make the brachas of the HaTorah before and after the Balkaire, lanes the HaTorah, why is that Aliyah called Maftir? What are these words of Maftir and HaTorah? So there are different pshatim that are brought down, but one reminds us of something else that we're very familiar with, and that is something that we say by the Seder night. We have the Afikaiman. Now we know by the Arba Banim, by the 4 sons that are mentioned in the Haggadah, you have the Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, the Eni Yedei Elishel. So by the Chacham, the Baal Haggadah says that you have to teach the Chacham Hilchas Pesach. You teach him the halachas of Pesach. What halacha do you teach him? Ein maftirin achar ha-Pesach Afikaiman. What does that mean? Ein maftirin. We don't eat a dessert. The dessert is the last part of the meal. That's when you're leaving the meal. You leave off the meal with the dessert. That's a maftir. Ein maftirin achar Pesach afikaimen. We don't have a dessert after the Pesach. We only have the afikaimen. The maftir is the dessert on the Kriyas HaTorah. We've finished the Kriyas HaTorah. Now we call up a maftir. The maftir is almost like an extra course, because as we've been saying over the last several days, we have 7 aliyahs. Those are the 7 required aliyahs that you must have on Shabbos. And then we have this extra aliyah. We have this 8th aliyah, the maftir. So the maftir is the dessert, and he's going to read the HaTorah, which again is kind of like a dessert. It's an add-on. It's something that we lane from the Navi because of a minig that we've discussed previously and we'll discuss again today. Another reason it's called maftir is you could see the shirish in the word maftir. You could see the word patur or pater, exempt. And the reason for that would be, again, the minig that we're going to see is that back in the day when there was Gzera, and I've seen that this Gzera was a Gzera that was made by Antiochus, when there was a Gzera where Klal Yisrael were not able to lane from the Torah, they exempted themselves from Kriyas HaTorah by laning from the Navi. So the laning from the Navi is called the HaTorah, and that aliyah is called the maftir because that's how they pattered themselves. That's how they exempted themselves from the chiyuv of Kriyas HaTorah. Okay, so with that, let's take a look here in Sif Aleph. Says the Mechaber. Maftirin banavi me inyana shel parsha. We lane a laning from the Navi, and that laning should have something to do with the topic of the Kriyas HaTorah of the parsha that we laned in the Chumash. Ve'ein peichesin me esrim ve'echad psukim. And we don't lane less than 21 psukim from the Navi, and we're going to see why. Elim kein salik inyana bebatzer mehachi. Unless the topic that you're laning from the Navi is a self-contained topic, and it's finished with less than 21 psukim. So if you picked a topic that matches the topic of the parsha of the week, so you found something in Navi that matches the parsha of the week, and it happens not to be 21 psukim, it's less than 21 psukim, then you could get away with less than 21 psukim. And the Mechaber gives us an example. Kigoyin, for example, Oiloi Seichem Sifu Al Zivchechem. Parshas Tzav, which begins with the carbon oila. So the HaTorah for Parshas Tzav is psukim from Sefer Yirmiyah, and it begins with Oiloi Seichem Sifu Al Zivchechem. Those words mean the Rabbeinu Shalom is instructing Yirmiyah to tell Klal Yisrael, Oiloi Seichem, your carbon oilos. Now a carbon oila gets burnt completely. Nobody eats from the carbon oila. All of the flesh, all of the fats, it all gets burnt up on the Mizbeach. The hides go to the Kohen who performs the service. But all of the flesh of the animal is burnt on the Mizbeach. So there's nothing left for anybody to eat. Not the Kohen, not the owner. The Rebbeinu Shalom tells Yirmiyahu, you know what? Your karbanos are not worth anything. Because unfortunately, Klal Yisrael was doing chatoim. They weren't living the way they were supposed to live. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said, you know what? Your karbanos, they're not worth anything to me. And therefore, oiloi seichem, your carbon oilus, which are being burnt and completely on the Mizbeach, sifu al zivchechem. Add them onto your zevach. A zevach is a general term for a carbon that usually is used to refer to a carbon shlomim. Now, a carbon shlomim, part of the carbon shlomim is eaten by the kohen, part of the carbon shlomim is eaten by the owner. So by the carbon shlomim, there is something that people eat. It doesn't all go up in smoke. The Rebbeinu Shalom is telling Yirmiyah, tell Klal Yisrael, your carbon oilers are not worth anything to me. So therefore, instead of taking a whole animal and wasting it on the Mizbeach, it's not worth anything to me anyway, I'm not interested in it. So instead of putting up the whole animal in smoke, better bring it as a carbon shlomim, at least somebody will eat from it. That's the anger that the Rebbeinu Shalom unfortunately had towards Klal Yisrael at that time. But in any case, that's the HaTorah that we read on Parshas Tzav. But that topic in Sefer Yirmiyah is over in less than 21 psukim. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at the HaTorah of Parshas Tzav, you'll see that it's 18 psukim. But even the 18 psukim, there's an add-on of 2 psukim at the end. We actually skip. When we have the HaTorah for Parshas Tzav, we read a nice portion, I believe it's 16 psukim. We lane 16 psukim in a row from Sefer Yirmiyah, and then we skip a bunch of psukim and we go to a later parak and we add on another 2 psukim from Yirmiyah because we always want to end the laning with something positive. So we pick 2 psukim that are positive, have a positive lesson to them, to tack on to the HaTorah to end with something positive. So really the topic that we chose to lane for the HaTorah is only 16 psukim. We have this add-on of another 2 psukim that makes it 18, but in any case it's less than 21. But it's okay because it's a self-contained topic that matches the topic of Parshas Tzav, and therefore it is acceptable. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Aleph, Maftirid, Kasav HaLavush. The Lavush writes, now this is a very interesting little piece of Mishnah Berurah that it discusses a topic that a lot of people might wonder about. But in order to understand it properly, we have to begin with a Gemara in Masechtas Gittin. The Gemara in Masechtas Gittin brings down a machlokes. Gemara says like this: Rabba v'Rav Yosef, the Amoraim Rabba and Rav Yosef, the Amri Tarvayu, they both said, "Hai Sefer Aftarta." A Sefer Aftarta. What's a Sefer Aftarta? A Sefer Aftarta is they would take a cloth. They would take parchment, and they wrote on it the HaTorahs. They didn't write all the Nevi'im on it. What they did was, they started, let's say, from Bereshis. They wrote the HaTorah for Parshas Bereshis. Then they wrote the HaTorah for Parshas Noach. Then they wrote the HaTorah for Parshas Lech Lecha. So this was a scroll that contained only the HaTorahs that are laid on Shabbos. And that's what the Gemara over here is discussing. The Gemara is discussing the validity of such a scroll. Rabbi Rav Yosef Amri Tarvayu, Rabbi and Rav Yosef both said, Hai Sefer Haftarta, such a Sefer of Haftaras, Aser lemikri bei b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to read from it on Shabbos. It is not valid to use such a scroll to lane the Haftaras on Shabbos. My time, or why not? The Gemara says a very interesting reason. D'lo niten likasev. Because it's something that you're not allowed to write. You're not allowed to write such a scroll. Why not? Explains Rashi, the halacha is, you're not allowed to write part of a Sefer Navi. When you want to write a Sefer of Navi, you have to write the entire Sefer. You want to write down Yehoshua, you can't take a selection from Yehoshua and write down a selection from Yehoshua. If you're writing a Sefer, you need to write the Sefer in its entirety. So you can't make a Sefer of Tarta. A Sefer of Tarta is just selections from different places in Navi. You're not writing the Sefer Shalom. You're not allowed to write it. Since you're not allowed to write it, you're not allowed to read from it. And since you're not allowed to read from it, you definitely cannot use it to learn from it, B'tzibur on Shabbos, to learn the HaTorah. You're not allowed to write. You're not allowed to read from it. Again, you're not allowed to write it because it's not a Sefer Shalom. Since you're not allowed to write it, you're not allowed to read from it. If you're not allowed to read from it, you certainly can't read from it, B'tzibur in Shul. That's what the Gemara says. Then the Gemara comes back, and the Gemara says, wait a second. Mar bar Rav Ashi Amar, not only can't you use it in Shul to read from it on Shabbos, till tulei nami aser. It's muktzah. You're not allowed to move it. My time or why? Because you just told me you're not allowed to read from it. If you have a sefer that you're not allowed to read, it has no utility on Shabbos. If it has no utility on Shabbos, it's muktzah. So Mar bar Rav Ashi said, hold it. Rabbi and Rav Yosef say you're not allowed to use it. Well, if you're not allowed to use it, it's also muktzah, and therefore also little tulei. But the Gemara says v'lohi. But that's not the halacha. Shari little tulei, you're allowed to move it. V'shari lemikri bay, and you're allowed to lane from it. Why? So the Gemara says to Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, we have both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, ma'ayni b'sifra da'agadita b'shabbata. On Shabbos, they would learn from Svarim of Agadita. Agadita, you have selections from the Gemara that darshan psukim. It talks about psukim, and it has Gemaras. We all know Agadita Gemaras. So they would have a sefer of Agadita, and they would read from it. Says the Gemara, v'haloi niten likasev. You're not allowed to write Sifrei Agadita. Why aren't you allowed to write Sifrei Agadita? Because remember, Rabbi say, really, me'yikar adin, you're not allowed to write down Torah Shabbal Peh. Sifrei Agadita was certainly Torah Shabbal Peh. So the Gemara is saying like this. Rabbi and Rav Yosef are saying, you're not allowed to read from a Sefer of Tarta because you're not allowed to write it. The Gemara says, wait a second. You're not allowed to read from it because you're not allowed to write it. How about Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? They read from Sifrei Agadita. How are you allowed to read from it? You're not allowed to write it. How did they even write it? So the Gemara says, Ella, what must you say? Kevan deloy efsher. Since we have no choice and we have to write down Torah Shabbal Peh. I'm reading from Torah Shabbal Peh right now. I'm reading from a printed Gemara. Since we have no choice, because if we don't write down Torah Shabbal Peh, Chas v'Chalila Torah Shabbal Peh will become forgotten. So Eis Lasei Slashem Heiferu Torah Secha, and the halacha became that you're allowed to write down Torah Shabbal Peh. Oh, so now we understand how Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish had Sifrei Agadita, because you're allowed to write it. Eis Lasei Slashem Heiferu Torah Secha. Once you're allowed to write it, you're allowed to read from it. Hachinami. So then over here too, by the Sifrei Haftarta, Kevin Deloy Efsher, since there's no choice, you have to write a Sefer Haftarta. Why do you have to write a Sefer Haftarta? So Rashi explains, She'ein l'chol tzibur v'tzibur yecholos lichtov neviim shalem. The individual congregations, the individual kehillas, didn't have the money to be able to write complete neviim. They didn't have the resources to be able to commission a sefer. Well, listen, there are haftarahs from Sefer Yehoshua, Simchas Torah. We learn from Sefer Yehoshua. We need you to write a Yeshua. We need you to write a Shoftim. We need you. We don't have the resources for that. So what are we going to do? Be mevatel the minig of haftarah? We can't do that. So it's lo efsher. We have no choice. We have to write a Sefer Haftarta. Once we have to write the Sefer Haftarta, kevin de lo efsher eis lasei slashem heiferu Torah secha. So we're allowed to write the Sefer Haftarta. Once we're allowed to write the Sefer Haftarta, you're allowed to read from the Sefer Haftarta. Oh, so let's encapsulate the Gemara that we just learned. Based on this Gemara, what we see is like this. You're allowed to write a Sefer Haftarta. You could take a parchment and a quill, and you could write down the selections from Navi that are necessary to learn the Haftarahs in Shul. You're allowed to write such a Sefer Haftarta. Why? Once you're allowed to write it, you're allowed to read from it. With that in mind, let's see the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah like this: Mavtiman, Kasav Lavush. The Lavush writes, Tamati. I react in wonderment. Al shaloi reisi noyagin, that I don't see the minig. Lichtayv ha'haftaros kedin sefer. The haftaros should be written on parchment with dioi in a scroll. That's the way the haftaros should be written. They should be written like a sefer. Ki hayonirali she'ein yotzid klal b'kriyas ha'haftarah b'chomashim hanitfasim. The Lavush says, from my vantage point, I don't see how you could be yotza haftarah if it's not written as a sefer, written on parchment, in a scroll, with dioi, with all the halachas of stam. We know that anything that you lay in B'tzibur, you lay in a Sefer Torah B'tzibur, it needs to be written on a cloth, it needs to be written with dioi. There's halachas of what the letters have to look like. A Megillas Esther, you lay in a B'tzibur, it has to be written on parchment, it has to be written with dioi. All the tzuras ha'isius, the shapes of the letters have to be accurate. So I don't understand. You're laning the haftaris, l'chayr it should be the same way. Now, against the backdrop of the Gemara in Gittin that we learned, we can easily understand what the Lavush is saying. The Lavush is not bothered by the fact that you're laning from something that only contains the haftaris. That's okay. The Gemara in Gittin comes out that you're allowed to write a sefer haftarta. But, says the Lavush, but it has to be written like a sefer. It has to be written on parchment. It has to be done like a scroll. It has to be written by a sefer in ashuris with dioi, with all of the proper tzuras ha'isius. So how do you take a chumash and lay in the haftarah from a chumash? That's the Lavush. And the Lavush says it's a wonder. It's a tumua. I don't understand it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'atazim Magen Avram yishvu haminik. But the Taz and the Magen Avram say that it's okay. They hold the af shehu al yedei defus, even though we're talking about something printed, not something that's written like a sefer. The gabel on niyar, and it's written on paper, not on parchment. V'shaloi beglila, and it's bound into a book. It's not a scroll. Mutter le'inyan zeh. So the Magen Avram and the Taz, they look at the Gemara in Gittin, and this is really a machlekes rishonim. They look at the Gemara in Gittin, and they say, look, once the Gemara in Gittin was a matir writing a sefer haftarta, it could be done in using print on paper and bound into a book. We don't need the halachas of a Sefer Torah. We don't need the halachas of a Megillas Esther. It could even be printed. It could even be on paper. It could even be bound into a book. And the fact that it only contains the haftarahs, that's okay. The Gemara in Gittin said you could make a Sefer Haftarah. Nevertheless, that's a Magen Avram, but it's the opinion of the Magen Avram that tzarich likrais haftarah mitoich navi shalem hanitvas v'loy mitoich haftarah levad hanitveses b'chumash. But the Magen Avram says, don't rely on the Gemara in Gittin to say that you're going to make a printed sefer haftarta. The fact that you're using print and you're using paper, that I'm okay with. The fact that you're binding it into a sefer, that I'm okay with, that it's not on a scroll. But the fact that you're only printing the selections of the haftarahs and you're not making a navi shalem, that the Magen Avram is not okay with. Why not? Because the Magen Avram looks at the Gemara in Gittin, and the Magen Avram says, why did the Gemara in Gittin say you could write a sefer haftarta? Because we have no choice. Why not? Why did they have a choice? Because they didn't have the resources. Says the Magen Avram, yeah, they didn't have the resources. Because for them to write a Navi Shalem, they would have to commission a cipher who would have to sit down with a quill, and he would have to write a whole cipher of Navi. That's a very expensive proposition. But says the Magen Avram, to print a Sefer Shalem? To print a Sefer Shalom is not an expensive proposition. Therefore, the Magen Avram says the heter of the Gemara in Gittin is over with. Once we're matir you to use print, we no longer have Eis Lasis Lashem Eferu Tarasecha to allow you to make a Sefer Haftarta. Now, if you're going to use print, you have to use a Sefer Shalem, not a Sefer Haftarta. And the El Yerabba reaches the same conclusion. It happens to be that the El Yerabba takes issue with the Magen Avram, but he reaches the same conclusion, Ayin Sham, that the El Yerabba and the Magen Avram both say, yes, you could lay in the Haftarah from a printed Sefer, but it has to be a Sefer Shalom. So if you're laning the Haftarah of Parshas Tzav, which is Yirmiyah, you have to read it out of a printed, complete Sefer Yirmiyah, not from a Chumash that only has the selection of the psukim of the Haftarah. Nevertheless, says the Mishnah Berurah, Im ein lehem rak Haftarah hanitfeses b'chumash. The Mishnah Berurah is machriya. The Mishnah Berurah says, if the only thing that you have is a Chumash that has the Haftarahs in it, yesh lismach lahakal, you could rely on those that are mekel, shaloi levatel kriyas Haftarah, and chas v'shalom, you shouldn't be mevatel the minig of laning the Haftarah. However, lichatchila, bevadai roi v'nochain, it is definitely proper sheyia l'chol tzibur neviim shenichtavim beklaf kadin. Lechatchila, every tzibur should have neviim written on klaf kedin. Sha'az gam Hashemis nichtavim b'kedusha, because then you get another benefit, and that is in Navi you have Shemos of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. You have other Shemus in Navi as well. We want them to be nichtav, to be written b'kedusha, with kedusha, with sanctity. That takes the work of a person. When a person sits down to write something, he could invest his writing with kedusha. A person is invested with kedusha. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom blew into us a neshama, a chelek elikim mimal. So we have kedusha. So we could invest our actions, our writing, with kedusha. We could write the Shem Hashem b'kedusha. You can't print the Shem Hashem b'kedusha. There's no such thing. So therefore, the Mishnah Berurah says, Lechatchila, we should have Nevi'im written on klaf. Masha enken kishual on yara nidfas, that's not kedusha. V'chein hinig hagra b'kihilasai, the gra was noig in his kehillah that he had sifrei Nevi'im written on klaf. The ka'es nispashe tzeh bahar b'kihilas Yisrael v'ashri chelkam. And the Mishnah Berurah says nowadays you see it in many kehillas, and he says that they are fortunate. In the Sharitzian Ois Katan Dalid, he says that especially congregations, kehillas, that go ahead and they spend a lot of money to build a beautiful shul. Why are you building a beautiful shul? Hopefully you're doing it l'shem shamayim, to be Mekayim Zekeli Vanveyu. This is my God, Zekeli Vanveyu, and I'll beautify him. His noel of fun of mitzvahs. You should make mitzvahs beautiful. So they build a beautiful shul to make it beautiful, but, says the Chavetz Chaim, the truth is that beauty, the marble that's on the walls, that doesn't have any halachic value, really. So he says, better use the money to go ahead and buy Nevi'im and be Mekayim Zekeli Vanveyu in that way, when you're doing something that has halachic significance. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Beis, Banavi, you lane from the Navi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Vatam, the reason for the meaning of laning the Haftarah from the Navi is, Mipnei shepam achas gazru gzeira al Yisrael shelo yasku b'Torah. At one point in our history, and I believe this was Antiochus, he made a gzeira that we weren't allowed to learn Torah, so we weren't able to lane Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos. That would be reading publicly from the Torah. The Karu Banavim Shiva, so what they did was, they said, okay, we'll take on a Navi, and we'll lane from the Navi. Apparently, the decree did not apply to Navi. So V'kar b'Nevi'im Shiva, so they called up 7 aliyahs in the Navi. Uberchu aleim, and they made brachas on those aliyahs the same way we do on a Sefer Torah. K'neged hashiva sheyut tzrichim lalis v'likaris b'Torah, corresponding to the 7 required aliyahs that we're supposed to have in the Torah. V'lo hayu kaimenim kol echad pachas mishlosh psukim. And for each aliyah, they did not lane less than 3 psukim in the Navi, because we know the halacha is that by Kriyas HaTorah from the Torah, we don't lane less than 3 psukim for an aliyah. V'harei ben kulam esrim ve'echad psukim. So now it comes out that the 7 aliyahs that they made in the Navi were 21 psukim. 7 times 3 is 21. Lakach, therefore, af al pisha gzera batla, even though Baruch Hashem, this gzera is gone and Antiochus is on the ash, the dust heap of history, minhaga loy batal, but this minig of Haftarah is not batal. Therefore, tikdu shamafter yikra b'navi loy pakas mi esra ve'echad psukim, and that's why you have this halacha here in the Mechaber that the Navi should be at least 21 psukim, because they used to make 7 aliyahs. Each aliyah had 3 psukim. 7 times 3 is 21. And now that we do Baruch Hashem lane from the Torah, like we've spoken about earlier, the one who lanes from the Navi, the Maftir, has to have a Kriya in the Chumash first. V'yehei kara b'Torah tchila b'mnei kavod HaTorah u'kamosh kasafti b'siman reish pei beis b'Mishnah Berurah sif katan chav ches. V'yevarech ha-Maftir sheva brachas. Another result of the original minig is that the Maftir makes 7 brachas. How do you have the maftir making 7 brachas? He explains the Chavetz Chaim. Dahainu shtei brachas shemavarach ha-maftir ala Torah lefaneo lachreo. When the maftir gets his aliyah, he makes 1 bracha v'shabach banu at the opening of his aliyah, a 2nd bracha shenas alonu taras emes at the closing of his aliyah. That's 2 brachas. V'achas ala navi lefaneha. Then when he goes to the HaTorah, he makes the opening bracha on the HaTorah. Asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'rotza b'divrei ha-ne'emarim be'emes. And then, so that's 3. The arba lachareha, and then there are 4 brachas that the maftir makes after the laning of the HaTorah for a total of 7 brachas. Keneged shiva shekara b'Torah, and that corresponds to the original 7 aliyahs that they would make in the Navi at the time that they were unable to lane from the Torah. Now we turn back to Samach Aleph Amud Beis. Let's see the Ramah. Bottom line of the Shulchan Aruch says the Ramah. Hago. V'dafka b'Shabbos be'inon esrim ve'echad psukim. But it's only on Shabbos that you have to have a minimum of 21 psukim. Shloisha psukim l'chalechad bin akruim, because that corresponds to 3 psukim for each of the original 7 aliyahs. Ava b'Yom Tov shekaron chamisha, but Yom Tov you don't need 7 aliyahs. So on Yom Tov, back in the days of the Gzera, they didn't lane 7 aliyahs from the Navi, they only laned 5. So Ava b'Yom Tov shekar chamisha sagi b'chamisha asa psukim. 5 times 3 is 15. Says the Ramah further, V'loi niskana ha-HaTorah rak b'tzibur achar shekaru b'Torah. We don't have a HaTorah only when you have a tzibur, so you have a minyan of 10, and only when you had kriyas HaTorah. Ava b'lav haki, but if you didn't have kriyas HaTorah, aser likrois im ha-bracha shalofaneh ula-achreh. Then you cannot lane the HaTorah with the brachas. So if for some reason you didn't have kriyas HaTorah, you didn't have a Sefer Torah, you're stuck in a bungalow colony somewhere, I don't know, you're out in the sticks somewhere, you have a retreat, and somebody was supposed to bring a Sefer Torah, the Sefer Torah never showed up. So now you're not going to have laning. But you have a Tanakh. So you could lane the HaTorah. No laning, no HaTorah. At least not with brachas. Ava b'loi bracha shari, but you want to lane it without the brachas, that you could do. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting gimel. Ava b'lav hachi. The gzera of HaTorah is only together with the kriyas Torah from the Torah. But without a kriyas HaTorah from the Torah, no HaTorah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Gaon, for example, Shaloi ha'olahem sefer Torah likreis ba. You didn't have a sefer Torah, so you had no laning because you didn't have a sefer Torah. V'im karu b'sefer Torah. Now how about an interesting case? You had a sefer Torah, and you had a kriyas HaTorah from the Sefer Torah, but v'nimtzei sakara kriyashi psula. You laned the whole kriyas HaTorah, and then the Baal Korah saw something in the Sefer Torah, he realized it was possible, and you don't have another Sefer Torah. So you had a laning. You called up 7 aliyahs. You called up the maftir. You had mamish a whole laning. But now you realize that your laning wasn't really a laning, because you didn't really have a kosher Sefer Torah. What do you do now? Do you make the HaTorah with the brachas or not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, in that case, you do lane the HaTorah together with the brachas, because you had the format. You completed the typical format of kriyas HaTorah. You went, you laned from the Sefer Torah with the aliyahs and everything. Happens to me there's a technical problem. It turns out that the Sefer Torah was possible. But you did the format, you do the HaTorah. V'ayin b'bir Allah. Now here we have an interesting one. Im ein erev she'echaylim lahavi hanavi ay hachumish bebeis hakneses lahaftir. This is very interesting. Again, I'm going to use the bungalow colony example. The bungalow colony, big bungalow colony, it has a shul on one end of the colony, and of course there's usually an erev around the bungalow colony, and you make it a ruvei chatzeros so that everybody could carry from the bungalows to the chatzer, vice versa. You have the Sefer Torah is in the shul. But you know what you don't have? The Navi was left in one of the bungalows. So you have the Sefer Torah in the shul, but the Navi is in one of the bungalows. And the Erev is down. That's the case that the Mishnah Berurah is discussing here. Im ein Erev she'echayim lahavi hanavi ayachumish bebeis hakneses lahaftir. You don't have a way to lane the HaTorah, because your role in shul, where the Sefer Torah is, and you laned Kriyas HaTorah. Now it's time for the HaTorah. We don't have a Navi. Where's the Navi? It's in Yenim's bungalow. We can't get it because the Erev is down. We can't transport it from there to the shul. What do? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Holchen Asara, 10 people should go. Umaftirin babayishamun achsham. Make the HaTorah in the bungalow where the Navi is. Bring the minion over there. Make the brachas and lay the HaTorah over there. Ubeberchas HaTorah gamkein. Even though you didn't make a laning over here, you made the laning in the shul. You had a Kriyas HaTorah. It was in the shul, it wasn't in the bungalow, and you're laying the HaTorah in the bungalow, but that, the Chavetz Chaim says, is okay. Okay, 4 lines down, Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Ibchal Rosh Chodesh B'Shabbos. Okay, Rosh Chodesh fell out on Shabbos. Ein hamaftir maskir shel Rosh Chodesh klal. The one who has maftir, so he's the one that's going to recite the brachas over the HaTorah. He does not mention Rosh Chodesh. What does that mean? Well, in the brachas that we make after the HaTorah, so we have one of the brachas that we have over here is, it begins, Al HaTorah of Al HaAvodah. So on a typical Shabbos, we say it like this, Al HaTorah v'Al HaAvodah v'Al HaNevi'im v'Al Yom HaShabbos hazeh shenosat lanu Hashem Elokeinu l'kedusha v'limnucha. So we say v'Al Yom HaShabbos hazeh. On Rosh Chodesh, if Rosh Chodesh fell out on Shabbos, should we say Al Yom HaShabbos hazeh v'Al Yom Rosh HaChodesh hazeh? Now we do that on Yom Tov. If Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, we say Al HaTorah v'Al HaAvodah v'Al HaNevi'im v'Al Yom HaShabbos hazeh v'Al Yom Chag HaMatzos hazeh, or v'Al Yom Chag HaShavuos hazeh. So on Yom Tov, we do add in the Yom Tov. Do we add in Rosh Chodesh? Then there's another place where theoretically we could add in Rosh Chodesh, and that is in the Chasima, in the closing of this bracha. So the closing of this bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos. Well, if it's Yom Tov, we say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos v'Yisrael v'Azmanim. So should we say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos for Rosh Chodashim? Says the Mechaber, no. If Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, ein hamaftir maskil she Rosh Chodesh klal. You don't mention Rosh Chodesh at all. Not in the middle of the bracha, not at the chasima of the bracha. Says the Mechaber, there are those that say, there are those that say that, yes, we don't mention Rosh Chodesh in the chasima. We don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbos for Rosh Chodashim. But maskirin oisai b'soicha bracha. But we would mention Rosh Chodesh up in the middle of the bracha. She'omer es Yom HaShabbos hazeh. He says es Yom HaManoach, the day of rest. Es Yom HaManoach hazeh ve'es Yom Rosh HaChodesh hazeh. But v'haminik is for a Rishona. But the minik follows the first day, or the first opinion here in the Mechaber, which is we don't mention Rosh Chodesh at all. Mishnah Berurah is cut and dalid, ein hamaftir. Why not? Why taka? Why don't we mention Rosh Chodesh? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, Dil Molei Shabbos ein Navi Rosh Chodesh. Because let's say it wasn't Shabbos. Let's say Rosh Chodesh is on Tuesday. Do we lay in a HaTorah on Tuesday when it's Rosh Chodesh? No. So the only reason we're laning from the Navi is because it's Shabbos. The fact that it's Rosh Chodesh is irrelevant to the laning of the HaTorah. And therefore there's no point in mentioning Rosh Chodesh in the brachas on the HaTorah. That's not true by the other Yom Tovim. By the other Yom Tovim, if Sukkot falls out on Tuesday, you're going to lane a HaTorah on Tuesday. So, okay, so then the brachas of the HaTorah are relevant to the Yom Tov. So when it falls out on Shabbos, we mention Shabbos and Yom Tov. Not so Rosh Chodesh. Sif Gimel, 6 lines down. Says the Mechaber, Tzarich lechavein leberchais hakorim b'Torah. When you're in shul and you're listening to the laning, you have to listen with kavana to the brachas of the ones who have the aliyahs. When somebody gets called up for an aliyah, he makes the bracha shabachamanu mikol amim nasalanos teirasai, or the closing bracha shenasalanu terasemes. You have to listen with kavana. Uleberchas hamaftir. And you also have to have kavanah to listen to the brachas on the HaTorah. V'yana achareim amen, and you should answer amen. V'yalu loy lahashlim minyan meya brachos shechasim in yana b'Shabbos. And by doing so, you'll be able to add those brachas to your count of 100 brachas. A person is mechuyev to make 100 brachas every day. Now on Shabbos we run into a problem. Why? Because on a typical day we have Shemona Esrei that we daven 3 times. Now our Shemona Esrei, right? It's really a misnomer. We call it Shemona Esrei, but we know that it is not really Shemona Esrei. It's really 19. We have 19 brachas, not 18 brachas, because Chazal added the bracha of Olam al Shinam al Tikva. So we daven 3 Shemona Esreis a day. Each one has 19 brachas. 19 times 3 is 57. So typically, on a regular day, we get 57 brachas towards our Meah brachas just from the Shemona Esreis that we daven. Not so on Shabbos. On Shabbos, we have 4 Shemona Esreis. We have Ma'ariv Friday night, Shachar Shabbos morning, Musaf Shabbos morning, Mincha Shabbos afternoon. So we get 4 Shemona Esreis. But those 4 Shemona Esreis are only 7 brachas each. So we only get 28 brachas. We don't get 57. Now, 57 minus 28 is 29. So we're short 29 brachas. Oh, you're short 29 brachas, you have to work to make them up. Says the Mechaber, I'll tell you how to make a bunch of them up. The way you make a bunch of them up is listen carefully, have kavana, and listen to all of the brachas of the aliyahs. Okay, 7 regular aliyahs, 2 brachas each, that's 14 brachas. Okay, then you have the maftir. That's another 2 brachas on his aliyah in the Torah, that's 16. Then he's going to make 5 brachas on the HaTorah, 1 before and 4 after. 5 plus 16, you're at 21. So I already made up 21 of the brachas that you're missing. That's what the Mechaber is saying over here. He says you have to be mechaven to the brachas of the aliyahs on the Torah, and you have to be mechaven to the brachas of the maftir, and answer amen, and then we'll be able to add those to towards your cheshbon of 100 brachas. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, and then I'll point something out to you. It says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in hay. Tzarech lechaven. Valkein, therefore, mitzvah la'olim sheyavarchu b'kol ram. Since the Mechaber is saying that the tzibur has to listen to the brachas with kavana and answer amen, well then it's incumbent upon the people who have the aliyahs to say them loud. Kedei shekol hakol yishbu, so that the people should be able to hear it. V'yuchlu lanis amen, and they should be able to answer amen. Make sure to answer amen. By saying amen, now it's as if you yourself made the bracha. Because when you say amen, you are being ma'ames the bracha. You are confirming the truth, the emes of the bracha. So it's as if you said it yourself. And you listened with kavana, shemei ha'ka'ina. One who listens is as if he himself says it. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ein lanos amen achar emes v'tzedek she'omer b'brachas she'achar ha'HaTorah. When you listen to the brachas after the HaTorah, the brachas are broken up into paragraphs, but the end of each paragraph does not signify the end of the bracha. So he says here, don't answer achar emes v'tzedek. Don't answer after emes v'tzedek, because he means emes v'tzedek in the middle of the first bracha after the HaTorah. You see, the bracha before the HaTorah ends ha-emes v'tzedek. Over there, you do say amen. That's the end of the bracha. But in the first bracha after the HaTorah, the nusach over here is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam tzur kol ha'olamim tzadik b'cha da'iro yisakel ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'yiseh ha'medaber u'mekayem shekol dvarav emes v'tzedek. Don't answer amen there. That's not the end of the bracha. The bracha continues. The bracha actually ends by the words Baruch atah Hashem hakel ha'ne'eman b'chol dvarav. That's the end of the bracha. That's where you say amen. And the Mishnah Berurah continues. So ein lanis amen achar emes v'tzedek she'omer b'bracha shachar HaTorah she'ein zeh siyum bracha, because that's not the end of the bracha. V'chein similarly ein lanis amen achar hane'emarim be'emes she'nemar b'bracha shelifnei HaTorah. The brachas before the HaTorah are also in many sidurim broken up into 2 paragraphs, but it's all one bracha that ends Baruch atah Hashem haboicher b'Torah v'Moshe avdoi v'Yisrael amoi u'v'neviyei ha'emes v'tzedek. Cholek. Don't answer Amen before the Chasima by Hane'emarim be'emes. Dezeu gamkin bracha achas ima shamer achakach baruch atah Hashem haboicher b'Torah dezuhi chasimasa. Okay, turning to Sif Dalet, 4 lines off the bottom, says the Mechaber. Katan yachal haftir. Me'ikar adin, a katan could make the brachas and lay in the haftarah. Haga, says the Ramah, vim karulam after misha eni yadea loymar haftarah. Let's say you called up somebody for the aliyah of maftir. So he came up, he had his aliyah for maftir, and now because he's the maftir, he's supposed to do the haftarah. Now, in our world, what does that mean that he's going to do the haftarah? He's going to make the brachas on the haftarah before, then the Balkar is going to lay in the haftarah, and then he's going to make the 4 brachas after the haftarah. Now, what happens if you gave somebody maftir, and he came up and he successfully completed his aliyah of maftir? Then you turn to him to do the haftarah. He says, I can't read. I can't read. He's a brand new, freshly minted Baruch Hashem Baal Tshuva. And he can't read. He's not educated enough yet. He can't read the brachas. He can't make the brachas on the haftarah. So what do you do now? Says the Ramah, Im karul maftir misha edeh loymer haftarah. If you called up for the maftir, somebody who can't do the haftarah, yachel acher la'amra, b'diavad, somebody else could come up, make the brachas on the haftarah, and do the haftarah. Now that's a chiddush. Because remember what we've said. The reason why the person who's going to do the haftarah must get an aliyah in the Torah itself is because of kavod HaTorah. We don't want to have somebody come up and only do the haftarah from the Navi, because then it looks like we're equating the Navi to the Torah HaKadoshah, and we can't do that. So therefore, the person who does the haftarah has to first have an aliyah in the Torah, then he can move on to do the haftarah. Now, we're not doing that here. Here we called up somebody from after, and he's unable to do the haftarah, so we're giving somebody else to do the haftarah. But b'diavad, it's okay. Why? Because what do people see? People see that we laned 7 aliyahs, then we had Kaddish, then we had Maftir. And the Maftir is comprised of 2 pieces. It's comprised of an Aliyah in the Torah Kedosha and then the Haftarah. Now, even though we're breaking it up between 2 people, still in all, people see that there's no such thing as the Navi being laid on its own. It's joined together with the Maftir. Yes, in this B'di'evidik case, it was broken up between 2 people, but B'di'evid, that's okay. And the Ramah closes off, Aval L'chatchila, Asr L'asais Kain. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Zayin. Misha Eini Yadeya. Hainu, what does this mean? Shekara mitchila hakotten b'Torah l'shem maftir. Let's say you called up a cotton, and he had the aliyah of the maftir. V'achakach nimtza she'eini yadeya lo yemar haftarah. Now you wanted to do the haftarah, he can't. He can't read the brachas, he can't read the Navi. V'chein b'gadol kagavda, or the same thing can happen with an adult. So in that case, yachal achar lo yemar haftarah b'rchaiseh, somebody could come up, and he could lay in the haftarah, and he could make the brachas on the haftarah. Because even though me'ikar adin, the one who does the Navi must get an aliyah in the Torah because of kavod HaTorah, nevertheless, b'di'eved, amrinan shegam bazeh ikar kavod l'Torah, we still are mekayim kavod HaTorah here, shenikar adavar, because it's very obvious, shekaru b'Torah b'tchila l'shem maftir, that you had an aliyah that was part of the maftir. Sharei hifsik b'kaddish b'kaidim. Because like I said, you had the 7 aliyahs, then you had a hefsik of kaddish. Now you had an aliyah, and you had the haftarah in the Navi. So they're very clearly linked, and you still have kavod HaTorah. If Pri Begadim Kosav, the Pri Begadim writes, if this fellow who can't do the haftarah, fine, maybe he doesn't know how to read, but maybe you could go Baruch, Baruch, Atah, Atah, Hashem, Hashem. You could read it to him word by word, and he could repeat. Then it would be better to take a stick to the one who had the aliyah from after. He should do the haftarah as well. The Ramah says, you should not do this to break up the maftir aliyah and the haftarah into 2 people. Don't call up somebody from after if he's not going to be able to do the haftarah. Nowadays in our times, nowadays, when in many kehillas, like we started off this year, they have a klaf for the Navi, and it's written on, on klaf with yoy like a Sefer Torah. So now we have a Balkaire who actually lanes from the Navi. Therefore, nowadays, where everybody knows that the Balkaire is the one who's actually going to lane from the Navi, you shouldn't look and say, oh, this is a b'diavad. The maftir is not laning from the Navi. The Balkaire is laning from the Navi. No, that's okay. Tehu yarma kol brachas, because the maftir is going to make the brachas. That's okay. Okay, let's try to get through over here Sif Hey so we could finish the page. I know we're going a little bit long, but I think it'll be quick. Says the Mechaber 3 lines off the bottom, middle of the line, Sif Hey. Im nishtate kamaftir be'emtza HaTorah. Okay, you called up somebody from after, he had his aliyah. You did Hagba, you did Galila. Now it's time to take out the HaTorah. You took out the Navi, you opened up the Navi, and the maftir made the opening bracha of the HaTorah. Baruch atah Hashem, ha'baycher asher bachar b'neviim tovim, v'ratza b'divrayim ha'ne'emarim be'emes. And then the Balkaire started laning the HaTorah. And 5 psukim into the HaTorah, something happened to the Bal Maftir, to the one who had the Aliyah, to the one who made the brachas on the HaTorah. Something happened to him. Chas v'chalili, collapsed, whatever it is. But now he's out of the game. Literally, what the Mechaber means here is im nishtatek hamaftir. If the maftir, the one who had the aliyah of maftir and who made the brachas on the HaTorah, if he went silent, nishtatek, be'emtza HaTorah, in middle of the HaTorah, habal is saima. So now you're going to call up. This guy Nebuch was taken away from the bima. Now you're going to bring up somebody else for the aliyah. Lo yaschil mimakim shepasak harishon. The Balkaire should not pick up from wherever he was holding in the middle of the HaTorah. He has to go back to the beginning, which is the same halacha that we have in the Sefer Torah by the Aliyah. If something happens to somebody in the middle of his Aliyah, and you call up somebody else, the Balkaire has to go back to the beginning of that Aliyah. He can't just continue on laning. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Test. K'may b'Sefer Torah. Ulin and bracha lefaneh. But how about a bracha? So okay, again, the Bal Maftir made the opening bracha of the HaTorah. Asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'ratza b'divrayim ha'ne'emarim be'emes, etc., etc. The Balkaire started laning the HaTorah. Now Nebuch, the guy collapsed. He was taken away. So you brought up somebody else. The Balkaire is going to go back to the beginning of the HaTorah. But do you need a new opening bracha? Should this person make a new opening bracha? This is a subject of dispute that we learned about earlier on, back in Hilchas Kriyas HaTorah in Siman Kuf Mem. Ayin Sham Hatam, take a look at the reasonings over there. For Hu Adin Hacha, the same discussion would apply over here. From 30,000 feet, what's at work over here is the following question. How do we look at it? When the Bal Maftir came up and he made the bracha of Asher Bachar b'Neviim Tovim v'Ratza b'Divrayim ha'ne'emarim be'emes, does that bracha cover the laning, even if he has to go away and somebody has to pick up in the middle? Or did he make the bracha only al das for himself? He was the one making the bracha. Maybe he made the bracha only having himself in mind. If so, when he gets carried away, and now a new guy comes, so then whatever is going to be laying from now going forward didn't have an opening bracha. So maybe you need a new opening bracha. Or maybe no. Maybe when he makes the bracha, it's al das the whole tzibur. So that's loosely, from 30,000 feet, that's the discussion. Look back in Kuf Mem. The Pri Begadim applies the general rule of Safek Brachas Lahakal. Since we have a Safek in Halacha over here, we always refrain from making extra brachas, and better you shouldn't make a bracha. Even in our style of doing things, where we have a Balkaire is doing the laning, the Balkaire must go back to the beginning of the laning. Finally, let's finish the Ramah over here, bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch. You should not have 2 people reading the HaTorah at the same time, because the people who are listening cannot discern between the 2 voices, and it turns out that they never really heard the HaTorah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton yod ushnayim gam lo yeh nikra HaTorah al yedei shnayim. Not only you should have two people reading it at the same time, you should not do the kriya between two people. Dahainu meaning she'echad yikra pasuk echad, Ruvain will learn pasuk aleph, v'asheni shoisik, while Shimon is quiet. Ad shebesayim pasuk, until Ruvain finishes the first pasuk. V'achar kach kori hasheni pasuk acher, and now Shimon will learn pasuk beis. Ki hamaftish hakar b'Torah tzarich yikra hu levad kol HaTorah. It has to be done by one person. I'm going to stop over here because the next Mishnah Berurah goes over onto the next page, and we're already running overtime, so we're going to stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The discussion of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasos sheduchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.